Why Investing in Your Staff is the Secret to Success with Chelsie Lamie, episode 297. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest episode here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I have a treat for you today, a highly successful law firm owner. And this is somebody who I have been thinking of wanting to have on the podcast. We didn't really make an effort to get her here, but she is somebody that was already on my radar from before our last Law Firm Growth Summit over a year ago. And I'm really excited to be having this conversation with her today. We had a lot of fun connecting before we hit record. So maybe we'll even share some snippets of that pre-conversation. But she is really somebody with an interesting story, interesting journey, and also very successful. And there's no better way to talk about how law firm owners can be successful than to look at somebody who has traveled this journey and try to figure out what is the secret to their success. What do they attribute that success to? And then you can learn from it and decide to maybe perhaps put some of that to work in your own law firm. I have with me today Chelsie Lamie. She is the owner of Chelsie M. Lamie Esquire. And many of you may know her from her involvement in a famous Facebook group, which I forgot the name of, so she'll share it with us in a moment. She's a Florida personal injury attorney, runs a 7-figure law firm remotely from her home in Mexico. Chelsie took her firm fully virtual 2 years into its existence, and her team of 7 have thrived working from home since then. Chelsie is passionate about providing the best possible representation to her injured clients while maximizing profits, ensuring work-life balance and for herself and her team, and creating a culture of compassion within her firm. I am really excited to have this conversation because Chelsie has been doing things differently than what the status quo is. And I can't wait to talk about her journey, because she started off doing the things that she thought she needed to do, and realized how off that was. And I think that's really important for us to pay attention to as we traverse her journey. So without further ado, I'm going to invite her on. Chelsie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Moshe. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And I do appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I know that you're busy, over there vacationing year round in Mexico. But this is going to be a great conversation. One of the first things that struck me is like, wow, you're raising kids in Mexico. And you talked to me about the schooling that they have there and how amazing it is. Why don't you share with us what life is like right now?
Life is busy, but really full and really happy. So I do have 2 kids, 6 and 8, just turned 6 and 8. And I did move them from the United States, our home in Florida, to Mexico, Playa del Carmen, Mexico, back in 2018. I think I had mastered a lot of work-life balance at that point, and I had taken my firm fully virtual that year. But I really wanted more than what I was getting in our life here in the States. And don't get me wrong, I love America and I love my American citizenship, but I just felt like this wasn't where I and my kids were thriving as a family. So we just picked up and moved to Playa del Carmen. Thankfully, there was a fantastic Waldorf accredited school there. And the amazing part was it was like a dream. We pulled up and it was in the jungle, open air, no walls on the classrooms, thatched huts with, just one wall in the back and completely open, tarantulas and boa constrictors and other poisonous snakes, but it's really just magical and amazing that they get this fresh air and this beautiful experience of going to school in the jungle every day in their childhood. So we're loving it. We love the food. We love the people. We love the culture. We're learning the language. It's been an amazing experience.
Now, this is 2 years ago. So your oldest was 6. What was your 6-year-old's reaction to, I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, to their new school?
Well, they're 2 boys, and they thankfully, we have been raising them in the Waldorf educational system and lifestyle since birth, which is just very limited television, very limited exposure to media, no exposure to adult conversations. And hold on to your hat, don't fall off your chair. No reading, writing, or any arithmetic until age 7. So my kids are, even now today at 8 and 6, are completely illiterate. My 7-year-old, who's now 8, just turned 8, is now in 2nd grade. And in the Waldorf system, this is the year they really pull it together and start learning the numbers, the letters, and they start to read. They hold them back, hold them back, hold them back. And then just like a boomerang, or what is that thing that kids hit each other? They have them. They're little wood things, and you pull back the leather piece and it shoots out a felt ball.
You're thinking of a slingshot.
That's it. Thank you. It's like a slingshot. So they're being pulled back, held back, held back, held back, and boom, the 8-year-old is just now starting the process of being slung forward into academics, and he's thriving. So it is pretty interesting to be a lawyer and to have my whole career being built on education and achievement and reading and writing at a minimum. And here I've purposely kept my kids in the dark through the Waldorf system all these years, but I love it, and they're thriving. And thank goodness I did that, because I think if I would have taken a completely YouTube immersed 6-year-old who knew how to read and write and do all of this and put him into the Waldorf in Mexico, he probably wouldn't have been so happy. So fortunately, we sort of set ourselves up for success with our long-term game plan of the Waldorf system. But honestly, I even think a YouTube immersed 6-year-old would be fine, because once they get over the initial shock of not every kid has a cell phone or an iPad, they're not all playing on the computer all day. These kids are, in the street, running around until dark, waiting for mom or dad to call them to dinner table, and just being kids and just enjoying real life and swimming in the ocean and having real tactile experiences that I was fortunate enough to grow up with, but I think so many in the new generations are missing out on.
I love it. I love it. Now, I know you have quite the origin story to how you got to this point. And I don't want to spend the whole podcast talking about it, but if we can take just a few minutes for our listeners to get to know you a little bit, how you became an attorney and how you ended up starting your own firm. And then I want to dive into the actual journey as a firm owner, the journey of growth, and the things that you have learned over time have become the important things along the way. Because as you probably know, a lot of the things that we do or we see others do or we think we're supposed to do maybe are not that important in our journey. And I want to start diving into that. So we can start with just a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into the deeper conversation of the growth of your law firm.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to share that I was completely financially illiterate. I wasn't raised in a household with any other lawyers or anybody who had even been to college. And I didn't know anything about money, how to handle money. And I most certainly was not allowed to talk about money, right? Because that was very unladylike. So I grew up in a difficult situation. I was homeless by the time I was 16. I did make my way down from New York to Florida and was a waitress, and earned my GED and applied to one college because that's all of the application fee I could afford. So thankfully, I got into the one college I applied to, and I ended up graduating very quickly, 2.5 years to get my bachelor's while working full time, going to the University of Tampa. And then had, of course, work because I was still broke. I had to put myself through law school at night at first, while working during the day as an insurance adjuster. And unfortunately, about one semester into law school as an evening part-time student, my then husband, my first husband, and I were involved in a 114 mile per hour head-on car crash. And obviously that changed our lives and our financial situation, for the worse in a very big way. That was a huge obstacle to overcome. But once I was able to get back to law school, I think I took a year off. I was suddenly found myself at 22 and the sole bread earner for our family. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No, so let me ask you about that accident, because I'm really intrigued. And it's part of the story where you just talk about it and you move on. I don't know. I think I mentioned this to you in the green room. I'm a paramedic, so accidents are something that excite me, even though it's something that was a really unfortunate part of your life. You said 114 miles per hour. Is that the combined speed of the two cars heading towards each other?
No, the woman who hit us was going 114 when she crossed the median, and we were going about 50 or 55.
Wow. So that's even more than that, right? So she's going 114, you're going 50. That's 160 mile per hour impact head on. That is incredible. First of all, that you walked away from it, right? And I don't know if you walked away, but you're here. That is incredible. Now, what happened to you and your husband? Like how long were you out of commission for?
Well, he had severe injuries, including a brain injury that obviously persists to today. And he's now my ex-husband. But the good news is we're still really great friends and are co-parenting very successfully. He actually lives in Mexico as well. And I really think, sorry, I just lost my train. I'm so sorry. I'm not doing so hot today.
That's all right. Not a problem at all. I was just asking, how long you were out of commission from that accident.
So after the crash, because of my ex-husband's serious injuries, including a brain injury, which he still obviously is not recovered from, we were out for at least a year. I believe I lost it's 3 months into the first year of law school, and I lost at least 9 months. So about a year that I was out of commission. And then I decided, hey, I've lost a year. We have no money. Now he can't ever work again. I need to get through law school as quickly as I can. So I did go ahead and decide to go full time. I switched to a full-time program and graduated from Stetson in Gulfport, Florida, 3 years later.
So what did you do? You took on a bunch of student loans?
Yeah, I sure did. I think they gave me like a jokey type of award when I graduated for having the highest student loan debt of a Stetson graduate at that time. Unfortunately, I am sure that I have been surpassed since then.
Right. So what is the dollar amount of that debt when you graduated? I know that you don't have a problem talking about numbers, so that's why.
No, I don't mind. It was I want to say it was approximately $180,000, somewhere around there.
Wow. So, I mean, a lot of people are graduating today with $300,000 in debt, so that makes that look like chump change. But
I'm not complaining.
$180,000, essentially, you're graduating with a mortgage on a house, and you don't have a house to live in, right? And it's part of the problem with the system today, but it's also something to be really aware of when you're going out and starting your own law firm. You've got this payment to make every month that's in addition to living your life, and you're trying to be successful in growing your practice. And I think that part of what causes people to struggle with the growth of their firm is because of the responsibility that they carry. And therefore, they always have this pressure of, I need to make X in order to survive. And that pressure doesn't bode well for success, because you're always trying to shortcut and game the system when the truth to growth is letting it happen. So I think that's just an interesting side note there. A lot of our listeners are carrying student loan debt. And I know that you shared with me before the episode that your credit was shot, your income wasn't great. So that formula is not a formula for success by itself. So, all right, you've got this terrible tragedy that happens to you. You're trying to traverse through life with navigating this, and you've got to finish your law school. You finish it, and now you've got this student loan debt, and you have to support a family. So what do you do?
I did what I thought was right at the time. I got out, got that associate position, making the minimum payments. Then we had 2 children over the course of 20 years of marriage. And I had an associate position that led to a partnership. And again, it all looks great on paper, but everything that shines isn't gold, right? I was living literally in my early 30s, paycheck to paycheck. Yeah, I was making 6 figures, but in a contingency partnership, I was only getting paid, a couple times a year, right? Anything that was significant. And I was missing payments. And I think in 2016, my credit score was 535. And but I had a $500,000 house, right? So, I didn't have any financial literacy. I didn't have anybody to teach me the way, and I didn't know any better. And it wasn't until I really started digging in and learning about money and getting comfortable asking other people about money, and seeing the writing on the wall that the only way that I was going to pull myself out from, all of this debt and to create a life that I wanted was to open my own firm. And that's when I took out the home equity line of credit on the house and made them, I say it's a mistake, but it was actually the best thing I ever did, right? I just did it kind of wrong. I took out, $100,000 and I spent $90,000 in the first 90 days back in 2016, starting this law practice. And of course, now I can look back as we've grown into a 7-figure firm and say, oh, I'm so glad I did it. But I can also look back and say, but if I did it again, I would do it differently. And I would do it differently by not spending 40 of that $90,000 on a space, a brick and mortar space, and paying to have it, painted and walls constructed. I could have started in 2016 with computers, a printer, and some checking accounts and an IOTA account at the local community bank. And if I would have done that, I would have at least saved, I'd say about half. And not to mention all the money I paid on rent for 2 years. And going virtual in 2018 was probably one of the best decisions I made with my law firm.
So I want to dive into this for a brief moment. One of the challenges that I am finding in the legal industry is that law firm owners think they can just start with zero and put some sweat equity in and grow their firm. And the reality is that mindset is costing them growth that could be happening had they been investing in the growth of their firm instead of trying to do things themselves and own it as long as possible before trying to delegate it out. And I wish that people would get started with some cash in the bank, that they would start with that $100,000. Now, at the same time, you're also highlighting that if I have cash in the bank, I very likely will spend it on the wrong things at the beginning. So it's almost like we need to have capital to start, but at the same time, we don't want to use that capital right away. We want to start growing through the growth of the firm to figure out where is that cash going to be best deployed? Where do I need it? It's probably much better to spend the money on hiring some people internally, creating some systems and processes, technology, automation, and then spending a little bit on marketing to bring those clients in to fill that capacity rather than building out a beautiful office. And I think that's really what you're alluding to is like, hey, if I would have deployed this capital differently, my journey would have been different. But you were quite successful fairly quickly. Where were you at 2 years into your journey?
I believe we hit we obviously hit 6 figures the first year, and we hit 7 figures by year 2 or just before year 3. So it was pretty quick. But again, as you and I have discussed before, it's not about gross, it's about net. There's plenty of attorneys out there who boast a 7-figure law firm, but who make less than $50,000 a year themselves. So you really have to, and again, I just want to go back, you nailed it on that. I should have spent my money. I did smartly spend my money on people. I've always invested in my people. So I started with 1 assistant, and within weeks we had 2, and within months we had 3, and we've grown up steadily ever since. And we did have the processes and procedures, and we did have the tech and the systems that we needed. But the money that I spent on silly things like furnishing an entire space and paying $2,000 a month for rent for that space to cram all these now growing. We grew out of our space within a year, and we had a 2-year lease. So it's that kind of spending is silly. The spending that you mentioned, you really hit the nail on the head. The people, the processes, the systems, the technology, a little bit of marketing. That's where you put your money in, not throw pillows, paint, and in office space.
Right. And I know that you have a focus on people, and I want to dive into that. But I think you also have an opinion about marketing and what people are spending on marketing. Because I noticed that even now you said a little bit of marketing, right? And I think that that's really one of the things that really gets people in the growth of their firm is maybe spending a lot of money on marketing, and that creates a crimp on their profitability. So what do you think about that? And what would you advise law firm owners to do?
Well, if you drive around my area here in West Central Florida, you'll see a lot of attorney billboards, but you'll never see one with me. And that's just because they're so expensive. And unless you have an enormous amount of money, at least in my space, which is plaintiff's personal injury, unless you have, that huge law firm that we all know that I won't name, their budget, you're not going to beat them at the marketing game. It's just not going to happen in that way. So my marketing budget has always been less than 6%. I mean, I don't even think I have cracked 6% of my annual revenue for the firm. And it's probably actually much less than that if I look at it. I get 75+% of my cases from word of mouth from other law firm owners, other lawyers, and past and current clients. So I really, and maybe I'm not the poster child for this. Maybe I'm doing it differently, and maybe it's not the best way, but it's the best way for me, because I don't want to be that giant law firm all throughout Florida or all throughout the United States. I just want to have the law firm that's the right size for me and my family at this point in time to do what I want to do, which is focusing on my team, making sure the law firm is successful, and that I'm always going to have that team there to grow when and if I'm ready. And I've had people all the time say, you could grow this thing to $5 or $10 million if you just would do this or do that. And honestly, I'm sure you can, and maybe that's great for that person, but that's not what I want, because I just want to work 2 to 5 hours a week in and on my firm combined. And I want to spend time being a mom to my very young kids right now. Maybe I'm going to shift in a few years when they're in high school. And maybe that's when I'll decide, hey, I'm going to take this thing to a $5 million firm, or larger. But for me right now, that's just not what I want. And you shouldn't live somebody else's dream. You shouldn't try to build the law firm that somebody else is dreaming of. You have to build the law firm of your dreams for where you are at that moment.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really, really good point, because one of the first things that I work with my coaching clients on is identifying what their personal need is from the firm. Like, what is it that you need to live off of? And then what is it that you want? And what does that look like as far as numbers go? And I think that if you ask anybody, like, okay, what do you want? And they say, oh, I want a $2 million firm. I want a $5 million firm. I want a $10 million firm. If you ask them why, they'll turn around and eventually, maybe not an immediate response, but eventually when you dig deep enough, what is it that you want? They want to have financial freedom, and they want to have time freedom. And whatever the number is that's going to buy you financial freedom and time freedom is really what you're after. So you don't necessarily want to be, some people do, but most people don't necessarily want to be that big firm that everybody knows about. All they want is to be able to bring home the big paycheck that they want. Right. So you are a great example of this, because you have no problem sharing your numbers. And I would like you to share what kind of take home pay you have on what kind of revenue. But if you've got $1 million firm and you are only bringing home $50,000, that's the problem. Scaling to get to, let's say you want to bring home 500,000, you got to 10x that firm. You got to get to 10 million to take home 500,000. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Right? It sounds like a ton of work for very little reward. You're much better off taking all of your time, effort, and money and going and dabbling in the stock market or something. You probably do better than owning a firm and having all the headaches that go with it just to create that tiny little bit of income. So ultimately, it's not, don't beat yourself up about the size of your firm, looking at the revenue or the people. Just look at the profit. How do I get this much money home? And if I can figure out how to get it home with less work, I'm going to do it any day. And I think Absolutely. That's really what you've built. And that's what's incredible.
And I love that I've built it while still, it's not just all about me. My people are happy, and when I say my people, it's my team. The people who I employ are happy and they have good work-life balance, and the firm is healthy and the firm is strong and successful. And it's strong and successful and functioning no matter where I am in the world, no matter what I'm doing, because of the people and the processes that are in place. And the things that I do to just keep that culture a positive one, to keep my turnover at zero, to maximize my profit. We cleared, well over $1 million last year in revenue, and I took home 600,000. That's my number. My number is always, I want to make between $500,000 and $700,000 a year. And we've been able to do that for some time. But it's just key to know what you want. And why do I want that? Because I have specific savings goals. I want to retire at 52. Now, I also know that I probably won't retire at 52 because I've built this amazing machine. I'd be crazy to just up and walk away from it at 52. But maybe I want to work 0 hours at 52, or maybe I want to work 1 hour and make one of my associates a managing partner, which means I'm going to have to reduce my income to $200,000 a year. And that's really the minimum that I can live on to live the lifestyle that I want to live. But I've got to have all this extra cash in order to do the extra traveling that we want to do, for the things for my kids that we want to do, to save so that I really can know that I can have a successful retirement in another, knock on wood, 12 years. So you have to, I really can't stress financial literacy enough, in getting a good CPA and getting a good bookkeeper and reading Profit First and implementing Profit First and just talking about money. It just amazes me how many people, in particular women in my industry, that don't talk about money. And you have to talk about money if you're going to get better with money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I don't think we mentioned it yet on this show. How many hours a week are you working right now?
I always hesitate to say it because I don't want a client to see it and go, oh no, she's not working on my case. But I've put in the people and the systems to make sure that every case is getting amazing attention and getting an amazing result. And that doesn't have to mean that I'm physically there working on it. I spend less than 5 hours a week working on and in. So that's actual legal work. And then of course, marketing or doing things, big picture, building the firm through the years. About 5 hours a week is what I've been averaging for quite some time. Now, of course, I am a personal injury attorney. So if we have a trial, for example, we have one coming up here in a few weeks, I have come back to my Florida home. That's where I'm sitting today. And am prepping for trial. We're on a 3-week docket in Miami. So I am doing, 10, 15, 20 hours a week here right now, but that's just a couple times a year when we actually have a trial. And those, of course, unfortunately, due to COVID, are getting even fewer and more far in between. Right. But yeah, I average less than 5 hours a week on and in the business combined.
Yeah. And, I think that that's really important to highlight, because you're talking about wanting to retire at 52. You're already retired, right? Like it's, when I look at people who retire and within weeks of doing nothing, they're looking for something to do. Yeah. Right. And what we have this idea of retirement, and really what we're saying is I just want the freedom to decide every day whether I'm interested or not in doing anything productive. Mm-hmm. And you really have that choice right now.
It's true. I've actually had it since I think age 36, about 4 years ago when I went virtual. I was working really, really, really hard, 40 plus hours a week. And then, I just realized I had to, in order for it to grow, I had to let go and let my people and the systems work. And that was the move to Mexico. And that's when I greatly reduced my hours. And it was 20 hours a week, and then 15, and then 10. And now we're at the point for the last year or two where it's 5 or less. And the firm continues to grow every year.
And you again highlights a really, really important point, because the real secret to growth in a law firm is when you, the law firm owner, stop doing the legal work. Yeah. When you hand it off to somebody else. I try to illustrate this in a way that makes sense to my clients, and it's gonna be hard on a podcast that's audio. But if you, the law firm owner, are wearing all these different hats, we'll just use hours to make this easy. How many hours are you actively billable to your clients for in the year? And as a law firm owner, whether you're solo or even if you have staff working for you, maybe you're doing 500 hours of legal work the whole year. That's probably a stretch, right? And you're maxed. You're working 68 hours a week. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how am I going to grow? You can't grow because there's no capacity. You're selling legal services. You're literally selling attorney hours, but you have no attorney hours in inventory to sell. So you are stopping your growth. If you hire an attorney who all they do is legal work, all of a sudden you have 1,500 or 1,200 or 1,800, depending on how hard you want to work them, billable hours. You've doubled, tripled, quadrupled your capacity by simply hiring an attorney who now, instead of you, who you probably weren't paying anything to, now you have to pay $100,000 or more to that person. But all of a sudden you've unlocked a $600,000 revenue stream. So it doesn't make sense how long we hold on to things. And the sooner that people recognize how powerful other people are in their business and how much that really is the key to growth, the faster they'll be saying, okay, how do I do it? When do I hire them? How quickly can I get them on board? So let's talk about people, because I think that is really, if we had to like say, okay, what is your strong point? Like your secret sauce, secret to success, based on knowing your story, I think that it's your dedication to your people. So you mentioned a few minutes ago, I've had zero turnover in the last 4 years or something like that, since 2018. What does that look like? How do you get people who are basically married to the firm and not leaving?
It's heaven is what it feels like and looks like. Just knowing that I have the right processes and the right people who are doing quality work, and with very little supervision on my part or efforts on my part, it's amazing. I'm very big on the everybody knows this one: hire slow, fire fast. I'm very big on my interview process. Back when we were brick and mortar and I was based in the US most of the time, we had a very complex system of, interviews in person and then coming in and interviewing with the group. And then I would take them out to lunch. And I learned this from something I read, a multi-billionaire, somebody like Jimmy Buffett or somebody did something where he would take people out to lunch and pay the waiter to mess everything up, right? Get this huge tip for the worst lunch and service ever. And he watched how the candidate responded, right? So, and I just thought that was brilliant, because you can't hide who you are when you're in a restaurant and how you treat the staff. You're either that person that looks the waiter or the waitress in the eye and says, hi, how are you back? And actually listens for the answer, and who can handle gracefully situations where you get the fish instead of the pork, or, don't freak out or have an attitude when water's spilled on the table and some gets on your lap. I really loved that interview because it really showed me who people were really fast. Now, of course, I don't do that anymore because we're growing too big and I'm not based in the US, so I can't do the lunches anymore. But we are definitely still doing interviews, group interviews with my team where they're talking to the top candidates. And then the biggest thing we're doing that's a success is working interviews. We actually agree to a wage and pay these interview candidates when we get our top 3 to work an 8-hour day. And then we look at their work at the end of the day. And you can see, again, very, very quickly what you're dealing with and who's all talk and who can actually back up with skills and produce work. So that's how we hire now. But yeah, my people are amazing. I think, the least amount of time somebody's been with us right now is about 2 years. The person who's been with me the longest has been with me for well over 12 or 13 years. And I just believe in not micromanaging, having systems that they follow, giving them the authority to make decisions within the decision tree at their level, empowering them, giving them paid time off, paid holidays, rewards for great work, monthly bonuses for goals made, including the trip that we do every year. So if you treat your people with respect and compassion and kindness, and you invest in them and their education and their continued growth. I have somebody who started sweeping our floors. That was her job when she came into the law firm. And she is now running my pre-litigation department that that in itself brought in over $500,000 to the firm in revenue last year. This is somebody who started at $12 an hour working for me in 2016. She now runs the entire pre-litigation department. So it's just amazing that if you identify quality people and you invest in them and you treat them right, they will bring you riches beyond your wildest imagination. And I know that sounds insane, but it's completely true.
Yeah, I think that it's incredibly insightful of you to recognize that it's just as important to vet the $12 an hour person the same way that you vet your, mid-range or upper range, experienced attorney that you're hiring. Often when we look at these lower level paying jobs, like one of the things I push law firm owners to consider doing when they're first trying to figure out how to start to offload things from themselves is to get a virtual assistant from our partners at Get Staffed Up. And you can go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up to find out more about how to get started with that. Because for $1,850 a month, you have a 48-hour-a-week employee who is highly skilled. They just happen to be in a country where the wage is worth a lot less, and therefore you get them for a lot less. But they're no less capable, and you get talent at a discount. But at the same time, you have to interview them. They have to be a good fit for your organization. You're hiring somebody. That's no different than hiring somebody who's going to cost you a lot more. So, I think that it's extremely insightful that you recognize that from, at the forefront. And then it's obvious that you have continued to pour into your people so that this person has the motivation and wants to rise to that level that she's at right now. The other thing that I think is interesting is a lot of firm owners think I can't afford the extra trimmings, the extra things for my people. I'm going to bring them in at the lowest possible cost. I'm going to worry about, and some of my coaching clients that are listening to this episode know that I'm talking about them, right? I'm worried about every penny that I'm going to pay them $20.50 an hour. I'm not going to pay them $21 an hour because, that's going to destroy my budget. And ultimately, I think that we need to recognize that it's the people that is going to create our success. And if we became a little bit more loose and free with how we treat them and what we're willing to invest in them, and not look at every penny as if that is going to, based on what's happened in the past, is going to continue to happen because that's the way that we operate. Instead, look at the potential of what that can create, what these people can create for you, and then be willing to go out on a limb and invest proactively in them. So at various stages, it probably was a stretch for you to provide some of these things that you provided to your staff. So take me back to a point in time. Think of a situation where you added a perk for your staff that was not expected. You just invested in them, but you couldn't afford to do it, and you did it anyway.
Probably the office nursery, because we started that back when we were brick and mortar. We started that almost right away in 2016. And at that point, I had at least three employees on the team. And, we were only a couple months in. We were $90,000 in debt, and we had just had our first month in the black. But I probably had, that was probably one of the scariest times for me. I just knew that I had a pregnant paralegal. I had 2 children, and we just knew that it was time to, I think we might have even had one other employee with a child, but we knew it was time that we were either going to lose these people because they couldn't afford daycare, or they didn't want to be away from their kids for that long period of time. And commuting was difficult and expensive. We'd have people who lived up to an hour and a half away. And we just decided to go for it. So we hired someone, and it was a little bit of a stretch, but I'll tell you what, no turnover from any of those initial employees still to this day. I got the amazing experience of having my kids in the office for 2 years, and having the team members we ended up having 6 kids at one point in the office at a time, ranging from newborn to age, I think 6 or 7 at the time they would come after school. But those people are wedded to the firm. They are so thankful that they got to spend the first 6 months of their child's life once they came back from maternity leave with that baby strapped to their chest. And they are just, a woman with a baby strapped to her chest under a year old is just as productive as a man or a woman without a baby strapped to their chest. And let me tell you what, it was sort of a cool thing. The clients loved it. You know, you might be afraid that a client might get upset or not think that you're professional. And these are all fears that I had, along with, you know, stretching the budget to make this happen. But clients adored it. And then they would tell their friends, yeah, I just got back from my lawyer's office. Do you know she has a nursery in there? And this, you know, this paralegal came in with a sleeping baby, and I got to hold, these are pre-COVID days. There's a baby. We got to, you know, hold the baby, and the clients would go tell. I actually had more than one new client call and say, are you the law firm with the nursery? Because we want to come in, we have a personal injury case, but we want the lawyer who has the babies in the office. And I know it sounds wild, but it really, we got a bunch of cases in where people had heard about us from talking to other people who knew that we had a nursery in the law firm. Judges got to know about it, and it was a cool thing to talk about after hearings. And it just opened up this really exciting period of time for our law firm. Of course, once we went virtual, then everybody could stay home with their kids when they weren't in school. So that was cool too. But again, people thought productivity would go down, revenue would go down, clients would be upset. And of course, all of the opposite happened.
Yeah, for the record, I'm pretty darn productive with a baby strapped to my chest too. But anyway, yeah, my son Tyler is hanging out in the office with me right now. He came home sick from school, and you know, he has cameo spots on pretty much a lot of our Zoom calls as well. And now I've got, you know, Derek, who's a newborn, and, you know, he's pretty much joining most of my meetings that are happening. I try to keep them out of the podcast because it just doesn't make for great audio when they get too involved in the show. But I'm a dad of 6. I clearly like children. I love that you created that opportunity for them. What was the cost? You had one person you hired, maybe a room you dedicated. Was that it? Like, was it as easy as that? And what are we talking about? A couple of $1,000s a month, $4,000, like $4,000 a month?
It was pretty low budget, right? It was pretty bare bones. We turned our little break room / kitchen into the nursery. So it involved bringing toys and some baby furniture from home, right? I had extra things, and everybody brought in whatever they wanted to use for their own kids. It involved a little bit of a budget for snacks, you know, maybe a couple $100 a month for some snacks, because parents had to bring their own food for the kids for their meals. But we provided snacks. I think the employee was maybe $15 an hour. And that employee watched up to, you know, 4 to 6 kids. And of course, all the moms are in the office too. So if there's an emergency or a problem, everybody could step in and you know, handle their child when they needed to. If somebody was sick, had to go home, or something was happening. We had a deposition in the office. So everybody had to, you know, get all the kids bundled up. I think we bought a big tricycle that pulled a giant 6-seater, you know, with the little awning. It looked like a circus act. They'd be going out the law firm door down Main Street in Safety Harbor. And they would just go out and do fun, free activities in the community, the library, the marina, the local playgrounds. Honestly, I'd say it was $15 an hour, 40 hours a week, and some snacks.
That's awesome. I love it. I love the idea. You know, I'm a huge fan of, daycare is expensive. It's more expensive than private school. So, you know, like that's a really difficult part of the early childhood experience for parents. And if you can provide that to your staff, and it costs you less than it would have cost one of them to put their kid in daycare, and now you're providing it for all your staff, it's just incredible. And if you think about it, you're really paying for daycare anyway, because when you're paying their salary and they're spending it on daycare, essentially you're paying for it, but they're getting less satisfaction out of their job because they come home with less. So in reality, what you're doing is you're making the salary you're paying them go further. So it seems like an expense, but it's actually really a lucrative investment. I love that you realize that, and you're investing in your people that way. What are some other ways that you're investing in your people other than empowering them, which I think is huge? I think that's really where people fall short, is not trusting your people enough to be able to make decisions, to be able to be leading a project, to be, just to give them the reins and say, here, this is your baby, go run with it. Besides for that part of it, like just, perks, incentives, things like that. You mentioned that you do a trip every year. I'd like to know more about that, but what are some other things that they're getting along the way that are just little pockets of, hey, I really appreciate you?
Oh, sure. Well, we have weekly team meetings virtually to stay in touch. So no matter where we are in the world, when we're all working remote, we can stay in touch. And we'll have like pizza parties or Uber parties where I'll have Uber Eats deliver food to everybody in their different place. And then we get together and, play bingo or some sort of, Pictionary online. But really, I think the benefits that my team love the most are time, money, and travel. Those are the three things that I've identified that my team loves. So for time, we give a lot of paid holidays. I think on average, a normal law firm in America gives 10 paid holidays or 12 paid holidays per year. We have 22. So we identify day before Christmas, day after Thanksgiving. We've renamed Columbus Day Indigenous People Day, and that's a paid day off. So we have tons of paid time off for our team. I want to say we have about 20 paid holidays is what I'm talking about now, at least 22 paid holidays, Martin Luther King Day, you name it. We then also have lots of sick time. So we have 10 sick days, and you use those only when you're sick. And then we have paid time off, and that's your days to use as you choose. And I've got employees, I think the lowest amount you can start with is 2 weeks. That's the first day in the door. Day one, you've got 2 weeks of PTO. And then it rapidly goes up. We've got employees who have over 2 months a year in paid time off is what they're getting, is what they're averaging. They've been with us over a decade. And then we have retreats, every quarter we get together. I fly everybody to one place from wherever they are. And we usually do something like, we'll do Savannah for a weekend, or we'll do Cancun, Mexico for a weekend. And it's just a weekend of team building. Maybe we'll do one activity of learning something new, like a new system or a new cloud-based thing we're unrolling. But for the most part, it's really time. It's like 3 nights for us to just reconnect and have fun and spend time together. And we really enjoyed that. The other thing I do is compassionate paid time off. If you've got a sick family member, I'm not going to make you use your sick time or your PTO time. And bereavement time's great, but bereavement's for after they're gone. They need you before they're gone. And we offer compassionate paid time off, which it can be anywhere from 3 days. I think I've paid up to 2 weeks for people to be with family members when they're really sick or they're passing. And I'll tell you what, I have a team member who came on and was not with me long when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. And she, at any other law firm under 90 days, she would have just been out of luck, right? But we gave her, compassionate time off. We gave her all of her PTO up front that she could use, her sick time, everything we could give her, we gave her up front. And then we said, and you can have a leave of absence, so whenever you're ready to come back, we're here waiting for you. That employee has worked her way up and has now been with me for over 5 years. And I'll tell you what, she never misses an opportunity to tell a client, a vendor, anybody in our community that story, and how it was so important to her that she knows at any other law firm, she would have been able to bury her mom, and that's it. But with our law firm, she was actually able to spend quality time with her mom before she passed. And that employee is gold to us, and she's never going to leave, and we're never going to let her go.
Absolutely incredible. The proof and the impression that it makes is there, right? Like, what do we want? We want people talking about our firm. We want them to, and what better place for it to come from than a true story that she's sharing on her own. You didn't coach her into it. It's kind of like, look, this is who we are. This is what our values are. This is how we operate. And if I take care of my people in that way, how am I going to take care of my clients? And it just makes it so much easier to get clients and to serve those clients, because that carries over in your staff. Your staff carries the same thoughtfulness that you have about them. They turn around and pour that into your clients, and it just creates for an amazing client experience, which further perpetuates a really successful law firm. So it is really, really short-sighted when you look at your staff as an expense, when you penny pinch how much you're going to pay them. I know people all the time, they're looking to hire somebody and they ask the person, what do you want to get paid? And they say, oh, I want to get $50,000 a year. And they turn around and say, okay, I'm hiring you. I'm offering you a job at $45,000 a year. Like, you're going to save $5,000, but you're starting off with that person thinking they know what I want, but they're not willing to pay me that. This is what they're willing to pay me. And great, I'm thankful to have a job, but that's how you're starting off. What if you started them off and instead of starting them at what they asked for, you said, hey, I want to offer you the job. Unfortunately, I don't think it would be fair to pay you what you want. I'm going to pay you $55,000 or $60,000 instead of $50,000. What kind of impression is that going to leave? And how are they going to behave in their first 90 days, having received that treatment on the front end? So we really need to start thinking about people as people and putting ourselves in their shoes and what they would want to experience as we lead a successful law firm. And if you don't think that leadership is important, Chelsie, how important is leadership in a successful law firm?
It's everything. And don't confuse leadership with micromanaging and being there 5 days a week, breathing down their backs. That's not leadership. That's counterproductive. Leadership is choosing the right people, having the right processes, and then letting go and empowering them to do their jobs and rewarding them for great work done. That's leadership, and it's everything.
And another thing that I really love is that you're not really investing heavily financially in marketing. Your marketing is almost like too easy, like too simple. And, there seems to be like a secret thing that's going on that you're not sharing. But I think that this goes hand in hand with how you're treating your people. And I think that most likely your clients are experiencing the same thing. Like, why would other law firms be handing cases off to you? There's a lot of law firms that do what you do, right? Why are they sending the cases to you?
Well, a lot of law firms who send me cases don't do personal injury, right? So that's where a majority of the cases that I'm getting are coming from people who do criminal law, immigration, tax law, bankruptcy. They don't do PI. And so rightfully, they're doing the right thing. I want to interrupt
you for 1 second and clarify my question. I understand that. But there's a lot of law firms who do what you do that they could be sending those cases to, right? Why are they sending them to you? And I think that that's really the lesson here.
Well, they're sending them to us because they know the compassion and quality care that the referral they're sending over is going to get. When you refer a case in the state of Florida, you're still responsible for the outcome of that case, malpractice and otherwise. And when people send their cases to us, they know the clients are going to get their phone calls returned. They're going to be held, their hand is going to be held, and they're going to get a great outcome. And they're going to get all this, not because I'm me, but because my team is my team. And the systems are in place and the people are in place. And they just hear back from the clients that they're very happy and they had a positive experience. So they keep sending their cases to us.
Yeah. And I knew that was going to be your answer, even though we haven't discussed this before. And I really think that shines through in this conversation. And it is really important for our listeners to notice and recognize, because there's three stakeholders in the business. There's the owner, there's the customer, and there's the employees. And you cannot prioritize all three. There's one that needs to be a priority above all. Some people think the client is everything. Everything that the client says goes, and that's the epitome of who I bow down to. Other people operate with, it's all about me. I own the firm and it's going to be everything that I want. And then there are those that prioritize the people that work in the firm. And that's what you're doing. And I truly believe that in those three stakeholders, the employees are the most important. The case in point for, if you think the client's the most important, how would you treat a client who's disrespectful to your staff? How would you treat a client who treats you like garbage? Right? If you truly believe the client was everything, then you would just, it's okay. It's excusable behavior. You guys just have to deal with it. And there are people who operate their business that way, but your staff is not going to take it. Your staff is just, and they're going to turn around and create a poor client experience for the rest of the people that are, that you're trying to serve. If your people are empowered, happy, taken care of, and they know that you've got their back, and that above all else, they're the most important thing, they're going to create happy clients for you. They're not going to tolerate clients that are intolerable. And that's going to be good for you to not have those clients. And they're going to make you rich and happy. So ultimately, that is the recipe for success. And I love that you've done this, you're demonstrating it, and people can really achieve success with that.
It's true. And it just happened the other day. Our paralegal is really pulling double duty right now, because our litigation paralegal, because my associate, who started as my paralegal all those years ago with the in-house nursery, she just had her fourth baby. She's out on her fourth maternity leave since she's been with us for about 5 years. And this paralegal is the newest person to our firm. She's only been with us just over 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And she called me in tears the other day because a client screamed at her, yelled profanities, was very rude. And she goes, Bethany, the associate's not here. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, first of all, take a break, clock out, calm down, get yourself together. And while you're doing that, I'm going to terminate the client. And that's what we did. We terminated the client. And she was so thankful. She came back in tears, because at any other law firm she'd worked at, she'd been told, suck it up, move on, and it wasn't a pleasant experience for her. And this is the same employee who had COVID a few weeks ago, right after this happened, and was calling me at 9 o'clock at night. And my phone's going off and going off. And I'm like, why is she calling me at 9 o'clock at night? I answer. She's barely able to talk because she's so sick, but because the associate attorney's out, she just wanted to make sure, and she was out sick with COVID too. She just wanted to make sure that I knew about X deadline on the X case that was coming up over the next couple of days. And she just really wanted to make sure I knew and that nothing got missed. I mean, that level of dedication and loyalty and service that, somebody who is dead sick on their couch with COVID is worried about this case and wanting to make sure we don't even come close to missing a deadline, because she knows, we have the lawyers out and it's just me and a pre-lit assistant on the case that week. That's dedication. That's loyalty. That's what makes us successful.
That's another great example of how powerful leadership can be when you truly are leading by example, and putting your people first. And there are not a lot of attorneys that will immediately terminate a client based on an employee's say-so of what happened. Even people who say they put their people first would go to the client, have a conversation and say, you can't do this, rather than just, hey, this is not tolerated here. Sorry, we're not working with you anymore. And I think that just your zero tolerance policy of that speaks volumes to your people, and they know it, and it's clear. Turnover is a real issue for a lot of law firms, but not for you. And it's not by mistake that that's happening. There's a lot of other things that we can dive into, but I think this is a really important topic that we don't talk about enough. We talk about profit first, profitability, and all of that, and I think we can talk about your journey with that. But I think ultimately, if you don't value people and you don't recognize how people are what you're in the business of, that is really a problem. And so for our folks who are listening to this podcast, think about any business. You're a restaurant, right? If you didn't have food to serve, would people come and eat in your restaurant? No, but what's on your menu is your people. Mm-hmm. That's what you're serving. So if you don't have people, or you don't have people that are delicious, people are not going to come and order it. And ultimately, that's what you need to focus on. And you can choose. Do I want to go as far as Chelsie has gone? Do I want to really lay it on thick with my people? Do I want to overspend on them and really shower them with time and money? And what was your third thing?
At the end of the year, if we meet our revenue goal, everybody and their +1 gets to go on an all expense paid trip anywhere in the world. The rules are they all have to agree, and then I book the ticket. So this year in June, we're going for about a week to Santorini, Greece. and I'll be taking 12 people because of how big we've grown now.
That's awesome. And I love that they get to choose a destination. I missed that part when you told me about it at the beginning, but the third thing was travel. And I really like that. I would love to work for you. I mean, like really, like, I mean, I work for myself. I'm not looking for a job, but if I had to work for somebody, I would want to work for somebody like you. One of the people I look up to is Michael Hyatt, very well-known individual who's, you know, he's well known in the podcast space. He also has a number of books that he's published and written. One of the favorites that I give all my coaching clients is a book called Living Forward that he wrote together with Daniel Harkavy. But I look up to Michael Hyatt a lot. He started his business and created an unlimited time off policy. And basically his people know that they can take off whenever they want if they need to. If they need more than 3 weeks, I think they just need to get manager approval, but it's not like they're going to be denied. It's just that it needs to be a conversation so that they know what to expect, you know, how long you're going to be out for, kind of thing. But what's interesting is that with that policy, people don't abuse it. Mm-hmm. You know, people are not, oh, I'm going to work there, I'm going to take 6 months off. No, they take off when they need to take off. They take off when they need a day to recharge. They take off when their kids off from school or whatever. And otherwise they show up, and they show up in a way that people just don't normally show up to work. They show up in a way that makes them uber productive. They always carry responsibility around their job because they know that with that freedom comes responsibility. Right. And I think that, you know, we really need to broaden our thinking around our people and how we look at the way that we're investing in them. And I think separating it from being an expense to being an investment is really where it starts. So Chelsie, this has been incredible, an incredible conversation. And I really like what you're doing. So much so that I need to make some changes with what I'm doing here internally, because you're inspiring me. We do have a great like vacation policy. We do also give a lot of holidays, maybe not 22, but pretty close. But we also allow our international folks to swap holidays. So in their country, their holidays might be different than they are here. So we just have a process where they need to submit which holidays they're swapping for which, and they're welcome to work on our holidays and be off on theirs. We probably could get rid of the swapping part, just give them off when we're closed and have them be off on their holidays. But I really like the different other things that you're doing, the retreats and things like that. So definitely, this is one that I'm going to learn from. I like to close out the podcast with two things. First of all, if you had to boil down all your experience and leave our listeners with one last tip or piece of advice from you, what would that be? And the second, if people want to learn more about you or how to work with you or get in touch with you, I know that you do a little bit of coaching for law firm owners. And you're also involved in that Facebook group, which I forgot what it was called at the beginning. So I want you to share that. So if you can just share with us those details on how to take a next step with you, I'd appreciate that as well.
Sure. Thanks again for having me on. So the Facebook group that I'm a co-admin of was founded by Lisa Wentz out of Plantation, Florida, and it's called Boss Lady Esquire. And it's a fantastic Facebook group for women law firm owners to connect with other law firm owners. I think that the main takeaway that I hope everybody gets from this is systems are great. And I'm always all about systems and processes. But the number one thing that has made me successful and has made my law firm successful is people. So really find ways, whether it's a $500 cruise or a $50,000 week in Santorini, it doesn't matter. Find ways to reward your people to keep turnover at zero and to increase your profits. And if you want to get in touch with me, I do, as you said, Moshe, do a little bit of coaching, only a couple of clients at a time. You can reach me at chelsealamie.com.
Awesome. Chelsie, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and I'm sure that we will interact with each other in the future. There's a lot that you have to offer, and we only touched the tip of the iceberg. So, but for now, I know you're in Florida right now, but enjoy both of your homes. Florida and in Mexico, and those little kiddos, 6 and 8 years old, those are wonderful, great ages. People will argue that as they get older, they're not as great, but that my daughter started this call. She's, at 22 years old, she's just as much fun as she was when she was 3. And, I think it's awesome that you are creating a completely different experience for them. Nobody knows which is the right one, but it's just an incredible journey that you're on. So just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm excited for whatever we have in store in our future. Folks, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, this is not an anomaly. We have amazing guests every single week on Thursdays. I'm also here on Tuesdays doing a solo episode. Sometimes we'll do a replay of a previous episode. But if you want to get this amazing content delivered to you in your podcast player, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you get notified every time we release a new episode. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, or you're so inclined to do so after just the first one, we would love it if you would rate and review this show, specifically on Apple Podcasts. And I think Spotify started doing reviews now as well. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and review, just like your law firm that relies on ratings and reviews on Google. We rely on ratings and reviews there for people to look and say, oh, this is a popular show. This is worth listening to. So we'd love it if you took the time to go and leave that review there. Until next time, let's focus on profitability, what you're taking home. Make sure that you're not building the wrong side of your business, and we'll see you soon. Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.